Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopirana Vallabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopirana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodananda Bhajananda Ranjana Yasodananda Bhajananda Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanchani Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Holiness, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Harinam Sankirtan Yaki ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Someone knows where we are? No. No, it's the lilamrta. It's the proper lilamrta. Anyway, there is a ribbon exactly in the middle, so that makes me think it's not where we are. No, not today. Alright, so we'll just begin right in the middle. We're reading from the Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, Volume 2, entitled Planting the Seed. Just as a little preface, in one lecture Srila Prabhupada explains about the person Bhagavat and the book Bhagavat. The book Bhagavat is the literary incarnation of Krishna. And the person Bhagavat is the Bhagavat personified, because he's living his life according to the Bhagavat. And therefore he is also the Bhagavat, he embodies it. So, and then Srila Prabhupada explained, he said, so the life and pastimes of the Bhagavat, of the devotee, are also Bhagavatam. They're also Bhagavatam. So therefore we should see this Prabhupada Lilamrita as an expansion of the Bhagavatam. So that's it's not just, it's fully transcendental. It was a mental and physical strain to go all day without eating. Jan was restless. Jan was restless. She complained that she couldn't possibly stay any longer, but had to go take care of her cat. Prabhupada tried to overrule her, but she left anyway. Most of the prospective initiates spent several hours that day stringing their shiny red wooden beads. Having tied one end of the string to a window bar or a radiator, they would slide one bead at a time up the string and knot it tightly, chanting one mantra of Hare Krishna for each bead. It was devotional service, chanting and stringing your beads for initiation. Every time they knotted another bead, it seemed like a momentous event. Prabhupada said that devotees in India chanted at least 64 rounds of beads a day. Saying the Hare Krishna mantra once on each of the 108 beads constituted one round. His spiritual master had said that anyone who didn't chant 64 rounds a day was fallen. At first, some of the boys thought that they would have to also chant 64 rounds, and they became perplexed. That would take all day. How could you go to a job if you had to chant 64 rounds? How could anyone chant 64 rounds? Then someone said Swamiji told him that 32 rounds a day would be sufficient minimum for the West. Wally said he had heard the Swami say 25, but even that seemed impossible. Then Prabhupada offered the rock bottom minimum, 16 rounds a day without fail. Whoever got initiated would have to promise. The beat stringing, chanting, reading, and dozing went on until 11 at night, when everyone was invited up at Swamiji's room. As they filed through the courtyard, they sensed an unusual calm in the atmosphere, and Houston Street, just over the wall, was quiet. There was no moon. As his followers sat on the floor, contentedly eating prasadam from paper plates, Swamiji sat among them, telling stories about the birth of Lord Krishna. Lord Krishna had appeared on this evening 5,000 years ago. He was born the son of Vasudeva and Devaki in the prison of King Kamsa at midnight. And his father, Vasudeva, immediately took him to Vrindavan, where he was raised as the son of Nanda Maharaj, a coward man. Prabhupada also spoke of the necessity of purification for spiritual advancement. It's not enough merely to chant the holy words, he said. One must be pure inside and out. Chanting impurity brings spiritual advancement. The living entity becomes impure because he wants to enjoy material pleasure. But the impure can become pure by following Krishna, by doing all works for Krishna. Beginners in Krishna consciousness have a tendency to relax their efforts in a short time. But to advance spiritually, you must resist this temptation and continually increase your efforts and devotion. Michael Grant. I first heard about the initiation just one day before it was to take place. I had been busy with my music and hadn't been attending. I was walking down 2nd Avenue with one of the prospective initiates, and he mentioned to me that there was going to be something called an initiation ceremony. I asked what it was about, and he said, all I know is it means that you accept the spiritual master as God. This was a big surprise to me, and I hardly knew how to take it. But I didn't take it completely seriously, and the way it was mentioned to me in such an offhand way made it seem not very important. He asked me very casually whether I was going to be involved, and I, also being very casual said, well, I think I will. Why not? I'll give it a try. Jan didn't think she would make an obedient disciple, and initiation sounded frightening. She liked the Swami, especially cooking with him, but it was Mike who convinced her. He was going, so she should come along with him. Carl Jurgens knew something about initiation from his readings, and he, more than the others, knew what a serious commitment it was. He was surprised to hear that Swamiji was offering initiation, and he was cautious about entering into it. He knew that initiation meant no illicit sex, intoxication, or meat eating, and an initiated disciple would have new responsibilities for spreading the teachings to others. Carl was already feeling less involved since the Swami had moved to 2nd Avenue, but he decided to attend the initiation anyway. Bill Epstein had never professed to be a serious disciple. Holding initiation was just another part of the Swami scene, and you were free to take it seriously or not. He figured it was all right to take initiation, even if you weren't serious. He would try it. Carol Beaker was surprised to hear that some people would be taking initiation, even though they had no intentions of giving up their bad habits. She had stopped coming around regularly ever since the Swami had moved, and she felt no desire to ask for initiation. The Swami probably wouldn't initiate women anyway, she figured. Robert Nelson hadn't forgotten the Swami and was and always liked to help whenever he could. But except for an occasional friendly visit, he had stopped coming. He mostly stayed to himself. He still lived uptown and wasn't into the Lower East Side scene. James Green thought he wasn't pure enough to be initiated. Who am I to be initiated? But the Swami had asked him to bring something over to the storefront. I came, and it was just understood that I was supposed to be initiated. So I thought, why not? Stanley had been chanting regularly again and had come out of his crazy mood. He was sticking with the Swami and his followers. He asked his mother if he could be initiated, and she said it would be all right. Steve wanted more time to think about it. Keith was in the hospital. Bruce had only been attending for a week or two, and it was too soon. Chuck was on a week's vacation from the regulated spiritual life at the temple, so he didn't know about the initiation. When we read all this, and then we can see how Prabhupada just in the middle of a group of people who had no idea what was happening, who didn't have much commitment to Krishna consciousness, was just holding an initiation ceremony. That was, like Prabhupada sometimes said, in an emergency. Prabhupada writes in his purports in the Bhagavatam that at the time of an emergency, then we have to somehow or other try, and we may give people positions for which they're not qualified. Of course, Prabhupada, by his own great potency, by his own purity, was also able to attract and inspire people to go beyond their personal limitations. I somehow or other became involved in the construction of Srila Prabhupada's Samadhi Mandir in Mayapur. And the reason was because the designer was from my country, and he had arranged, he wanted that I would work with him. He thought he could nicely work with me. Yes, that was, and his story was simply this, that when Srila Prabhupada's early days in Mumbai, then Bombay, the land in Juhu Beach, there was a temporary temple constructed. And Hans Kalman, who was there as a tourist in Bombay, visited the land. Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he saw this foreigner and immediately spoke to him and found out he was an architect. He took him to Prabhupada, said, "This is Hans Kalman, he is an architect." And Prabhupada's eyes became round, said, "Oh, architect, oh, bring pen and paper." So they brought. And Prabhupada said, "We need a temple in Vrindavan, and it should be like a traditional temple." And within moments, Hans Kalman was drawing. Now, I worked with him for a long time. When he put his pen to paper, the pen was on the paper, and he wouldn't lift his hand. He would draw the whole thing in one line. I have seen, just very fast, and make a whole sketch of a building in one line. And it just went into some sort of trance when he was designing these buildings. And whatever came out, Prabhupada liked it. So then Prabhupada told him also, Prabhupada said, oh, very nice, thank you. And they're chatting a little, and then Prabhupada said, I want to invite you to come tomorrow. There will be an initiation ceremony. Oh, that sounds interesting, Hans said. Who will be initiated? Prabhupada said, you. And in this way, he just kidnapped him, literally, right? Just sort of, he wanted him, and that was it. Just initiated him. And somehow or other, somehow or other was able not only to do that, but also to inspire him to carry on and to actually live the life of a devotee. And later in his life, he was a grihasta. And as a grihasta, he was making various architectural designs, and he was supervising the construction of the temple in Vrindavan. But then there were some marriage issues. So on one occasion, he complained to Prabhupada about his marriage. And Prabhupada said, okay, no problem. I'll give you sannyas. And then he just gave him sannyas the next day. Same thing. Just like the first initiation. He gave him sannyas like that also. Quite amazing how that just all happened. And how Prabhupada was just so transcendental. And how he just needed initiated devotees. He needed people to be serious, to make a commitment. And he knew that some of them might not make it and so on. But anyway, what to do? Somehow we're in a war, there will be some casualties. And Prabhupada said it is a war with illusion, a war with Maya. And he needed initiated devotees. So in this way, Prabhupada was ready to go forward. No one was asked to shave his head, or even cut his hair, or change his dress. No one offered Prabhupada the traditional Guru Dakshin, the donation as a disciple is supposed to offer as a gesture of his great obligation to his master. Hardly anyone even relieved him of his chores, or how you say that? Chores. Of his chores. So Swamiji himself had to do most of the cooking and other preparations for the initiation. He was perfectly aware of the mentality of his boys. And he didn't try to force anything on anyone. Some of the initiates didn't know until after the initiation, when they had inquired that the 4 rules, no meat eating, no illicit sex, no intoxication, and no gambling, were mandatory for all disciples. Prabhupada's reply then was, I'm very glad that you're finally asking me that. He posted that on a notice on the board. It's just a notice on the board. All initiated disciples should follow these principles and also refrain from frivolous sports and chant a minimum of 16 rounds daily. And that was it. It was an afterthought. No one had ever even thought about it. It is inconceivable. Prabhupada took tremendous risk, and Srila Prabhupada writes in a letter to Yadurani, he writes that when it comes to first initiation, I am very liberal. I'm giving it very liberal, and I'm prepared to go to hell. Right? And in other words, the spiritual master is getting reactions from the people he initiates. And Prabhupada said, I'm prepared to go to hell. So sometimes I think about that. Am I prepared to go to hell? Well, I'd rather not. To be honest, I'd rather not. But in the end, I'd say, I guess so. Maybe not with that same... but I secretly hope that somehow or other Prabhupada, Lord Chaitanya will save me from having to go to hell. But this also makes it very clear that we should follow strictly. I remember when I was very new, it was an Ekadasi, and we were out on Sankirtan, and I forgot all about it, and I had some a nice sandwich left over from the day before. So I just munched into my sandwich and I was going for it. And then the Sankirtan leader, a senior devotee, appears and said, "What are you doing? It's Ekadasi." I said, "Oh, well, what to do? Gosh, I broke it. Anyway, I guess I'll fast, the day after tomorrow was what we were doing, right? Dwadasi, I didn't fast. Then on the Trayodasi, I was going to fast. And then I kept on eating the sandwich. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I broke it anyway." Now that I broke it, I may as well, eat the sandwich, right? I was really attached to my sandwich. But then he explained, he said, no, if you eat grains on Ekadasi, you are killing your spiritual master. Right? I go, oh my God. I looked at my sandwich, threw it away, and the birds started feasting on it. And that was it. So, yes, I mean, it was sort of a serious thing. I was killing my spiritual master. I never thought of that. It's just, but it is in this way serious. It's a serious commitment. Krishna consciousness and initiation. One must really embrace it and make it work. And in order to make it work, one has to work for it. Right? One has to make an effort in sadhana. When we make an effort, Krishna will reciprocate, and then it becomes possible. Otherwise, if we take it very casually, yes, okay, and got a new name and this, that, but then how are we going to follow it? It's easy to promise, very difficult not to break the promise. So many have promised, and so many have broken at certain points in time. So, therefore, I thought I'd just comment a little bit about how serious it actually is. It was to be a live Vedic sacrifice with a ceremonial fire right there in the front room of Swamiji's apartment. In the center of the room was the sacrificial arena, a platform of bricks 4 inches high and 2 feet square, covered with a mound of dirt. The dirt was from the courtyard and the bricks were from a nearby gutted building. Around the mound were 11 bananas, clarified butter, sesame seeds, whole barley grains, 5 colors of powdered dyes, and a supply of, I don't know what that is, kindling. What is kindling, right? Oh, okay. The 11 initiates took up most of the remaining space in the front room as they sat on the floor, knee to knee, around the sacrificial arena. The guests in the hallway peered curiously through the open door. For everyone except the Swami, this was all new and strange, and every step of the ceremony took place under his direction. When some of the boys had made a mess of trying to apply the Vaishnav tilak to the foreheads, Prabhupada had patiently guided his finger up their foreheads, making a neat, narrow V. He sat before the mound of earth, looking out at his congregation. They appeared not much different from any other group of young hippies from the Lower East Side who might have assembled at any number of happenings, spiritual, cultural, musical, and whatever. Some were just checking out a new scene. Some were deeply devoted to the Swami, but everyone was curious. He had requested them to chant the Hare Krishna mantra softly throughout the ceremony, and the chanting had now become a continual drone, accompanying his mysterious movements as head priest of the Vedic rite. He began by lighting 12 sticks of incense. Then he performed purification with water. Taking a spoon in his left hand, he put 3 drops of water from a goblet into his right and sipped the water. He repeated the procedure 3 times. The 4th time he did not sip, but flicked the water onto the floor behind him. He then passed the spoon and goblet around for the initiates, who tried to copy what they had seen. When some of them placed the water in the wrong hand or sipped in the wrong way, Swami Ji patiently corrected them. Now, he said, repeat after me. And he had them repeat, one word at a time, a Vedic mantra for purification. Om pavitra pavitrova sarvavastam gatopiva yasmarit pundarikaksam sabaya bhyantara suchi Sri Vishnu, Sri Vishnu, Sri Vishnu. The initiates tried falteringly to follow his pronunciation of the words which they'd never heard. Then he gave the translation. Unpurified or purified, or even having passed through all situations, one who remembers the lotus-eyed Supreme Personality of Godhead is cleansed within and without. 3 times he repeated the sipping of water, the drone of the Hare Krishna mantra filling the room as the goblet passed from initiate to initiate and back again to him, and 3 times he led the chanting of the mantra, Om Apavitra. Then he raised a hand, and as the buzzing of the chanting trailed off into silence, he began his lecture. So we can see that Srila Prabhupada introduced an authorized process. The ceremony was performed according to scriptural injunction, and Prabhupada did it properly as possible under the circumstances. And from the very beginning, Prabhupada did not introduce everything all at once, but gradually, step by step, he was introducing more and more of the authorized process of devotional service. Srila Rupa Goswami is explaining in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu that he explains the process of sadhana bhakti. And that process of sadhana bhakti, which is the process of cultivating one's dormant love for Krishna. So he says this cultivation of bhakti has 64 limbs, or 64 different aspects. Many of them are related to the deity, and it says in these 64 limbs we are engaging the senses in the service of Krishna. And by engaging the senses in the service of Krishna, we're fulfilling the principle of the Narada Pancharatra, which is Sarvopadi Vinir Muktam Tat Paratvena Nirmanam Rishikena Rishikesa Sevanam Bhaktir Uchate. That we are engaging the senses in serving the senses, pleasing the senses of Krishna. And in this way, the master of the senses, Rishikesh, and in this way our senses become purified. Srila Rupa Goswami, when he begins to list the 64 aspects of sadhana bhakti, the first one is Ado Guru Pada Asraya. First, we must take shelter of the lotus feet of the spiritual master. Now, we should understand that we can use the metaphor of constructing a building, and how Srila Rupa Goswami, with the different limbs of bhakti, of sadhana bhakti, gives us the building blocks for that construction. And that the very foundation of that construction is Ado Guru Padasraya. First, take shelter of the spiritual master. And that's not like one time, not like in one occasion, all right, I surrender now, I'm offering my life to you, please accept it. All right, thank you very much, that's nice of you to offer me your life. No, it's not a one-time thing, it's an ongoing thing. Ado Guru Padas Raya means that the foundation of all our activities at all times for the rest of our life are that we have surrendered to the spiritual master, and we're always acting as the surrendered servant of the spiritual master. So it's Ado Guru Padas Raya is an ongoing foundation of spiritual life. And then we can gradually construct our sadhana bhakti on top, and then we can come to attachment, serving Krishna with attachment, and then our dormant love for Krishna begins to awaken. So, therefore, even at the very early stages, when actually people had developed some faith in Swamiji, when actually they actually believed that he indeed was a pure devotee, and that he was teaching something that was bona fide. When that faith was there, and of course Prabhupada was able to generate that quite quickly, then he initiated. And at least some had that faith. Maybe not everyone who took initiation had that faith. But then he gave initiation, and in this way cementing their commitment and sort of pushing them towards that surrender. And in this way carving out a movement, in a transcendental movement in the domain of Maya, right? Right there in the capital of Maya, in New York City. And right there, Srila Prabhupada just initiated these devotees and somehow or other created that very powerful focus on spiritual life in that way. And since we are now so many years later, we can see how these initiations landed, and actually pretty good if you look at it, right? Quite a good average. I mean, they all pretty much stayed devotees. Mukunda still there. Bruce became Brahmananda. Steve Satsarup, and Chuck, who became Achyutananda, who stayed around, well, for a long time active, now maybe a little less active. But no one, even those who took initiation and later left, they couldn't really leave. They could leave the association of the devotees. They could leave the chanting of Hare Krishna. They could leave the four regulative principles. They could leave all that. But they couldn't leave Prabhupada, because Prabhupada still stayed with him, still stayed with them. It is said that a devotee who once he has tasted the taste of devotional service, then he's rasagraha, one who has tasted. And such a devotee cannot not forget that taste. He cannot really leave. Right? Still takes Krishna consciousness with him. Yes. And of course, and therefore, there is that verse that even when a devotee falls down, apichit sudra charo bhajate mamananyabhak saduri visamantavya samyak vyavasita saha. It said when a devotee falls down, he is still saintly. He is still saintly. How is he still saintly? Because deep down in his heart, he still knows he's a devotee of Krishna. Still knows. It's very interesting that once we join this movement, that there is an identity change, right? And that even when we dream, right? We still know we're devotees. We still know I'm a devotee. It does. That change of identity is very deep, because at the time of dreaming, of sleep, we forget all the externals. You'd say, well, you might forget. You sleep, you might forget. Say, no, these things stay. We still know. We are a devotee. So the initiation is not an external thing. It happens on another plane. It descends directly from the spiritual plane. It is very deeply affecting us, and it's an actual change of identity. It is an actual change of identity. Krishna has accepted us. Krishna says, at that time, he accepts us. Any comments? Any questions? Yeah, I saw. Right. Yeah, the first three. Yes. Yes. Yes, that is true. And yes, so first take shelter, then take initiation, and then one must also live according to the initiation, by following the orders of the spiritual master. In this way, Srila Goswami has also very clearly established the point, right? It's like it doesn't leave any leeway. Can't say, well, still we also see that Srila Prabhupada, when he conducted the initiation in a traditional way, but there were also a few personal elements. Right? One element was the number of rounds, the 16 rounds. In the Chaitanya Bhagavat there is a passage where it is said that if Lord Chaitanya one day said that he was invited by different brahmanas to come and take meals in their house, and Lord Chaitanya said he would not take any meals in the house of any brahmana who was not a lakpati. A lakpati meant who had 100,000. So in those days, to have 100,000 rupees, you had to be extremely rich. So nobody was that rich. So they said, oh. But then Lord Chaitanya explained what he meant. Not rupees, no, holy names. Anyone who chants 100,000 holy names a day. Only in the house of such a devotee, only from them he would accept an offering. He would only accept an offering from one who would be a lakpati. And that's where that's the root of the 64 round number, that magic number, 64 rounds, because you may wonder, why 64? Because that statement of Lord Chaitanya. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, when he was, he formalized initiations. The movement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had gone through different phases. In the initial phase, we see that initiations are happening, but not very formal. Not very formal. Not like formal exchange of vows, but it's somehow or other a name. We see Rupa and Sanatan, a name change, and then sort of, okay, now they're initiated. So we see in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's earlier movement that initiation is something not very formalized and kind of happening, and sometimes you wonder, was this Diksha, was this Siksha, what was it? But then, and scholars debate it also, and then, but then over time, after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, so many Apasampradayas came up, even before they already existed, but they start to influence Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement. And we see that at the time of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the movement had become very weak and watered down, and then it's Bhaktivinoda Thakur who is doing a strong revival. And then comes Srila Bhaktisiddhanta as the answer to Bhaktivinoda Thakur's prayers. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta is a brilliant, super learned scholar, and he is just really really establishing standards, and he goes left and right, and he is establishing standards of initiation, and it is Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur who sort of created the format that we have today, to an extent, of first initiation, Harinam, second initiation, giving the thread, all that came. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta would not ask at the time of initiation, and what are the four regulative principles? He would also not ask, and how many rounds are you promising to chant daily? He wouldn't ask. It was understood. It was understood in the teachings of the Guru, of the spiritual master, that these principles had to be followed, and that anyone who chanted less than 64 rounds was fallen, but that they should chant at least, all members of the Gaudiya Math should chant at least a minimum of 4 rounds. 4 to 64 rounds. That was what was understood. Right? Even nowadays, I heard that sometimes on a day of Janmashtami, when there's so much service that's very difficult to chant, then some don't chant, they just do service, and that also is not enforced. I mean, we would be like, well, you'll have to make it up, right? You'll have to make it up the next day, what to do, So Prabhupada formalized that in the initiation that he brought in. He took whatever his spiritual master established, but then he did something more. He started this thing of formally making people pronounce the 4 regulative principles, and he brought it down to 16 rounds. And that is kind of amazing. When Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was saying anywhere from 4 to 64, then we should understand that at the number 4, that was, well, some sort of connection, but not the full connection. The full connection of 64, where Lord Chaitanya accepts the offering, was the connection of going back to Godhead this lifetime. And when Prabhupada brought down the number to 16 rounds, Prabhupada offered for that price of 16 rounds the full value of going back to Godhead this lifetime. That's what he could only do, that on the strength of his own credit with Krishna. The spiritual master has credit with Krishna for his service, and therefore Krishna is inclined to uphold his words. Prabhupada had so much credit with Krishna. Krishna upheld his words. So this, and Prabhupada clearly said on many occasions, if one follows 4 regulative principles and chants 16 rounds, then one can go back to Godhead. He said it in Portland. Dinabandhu said that Prabhupada said, chant 16 rounds, 4 regulative principles, and you'll go back to Godhead. I guarantee it, I guarantee it, I guarantee it. Right? He said it on other occasions. Rishi Uchu, the saintly personality, says, and if he says you chant 16 rounds and you go back to Godhead, you must go. Like that. There are plenty of quotes where Srila Prabhupada establishes 16 rounds and you go back to Godhead. So, although he lowered the number of rounds, he gave the full benefit of going back to God at this lifetime. Whereas if we chant, sometimes I've seen people who connected to other Gaudiyas, Vaishnavas, and took an initiation at 4 rounds, right? And it's sort of like, hey, you're chanting 16. I mean, I only chant 4. I got it cheaper than you, kind of thing, right? But yes, not only did you get some, yes, cheaper, but what you bought is also cheaper, right? You didn't buy the life time back to Godhead. You bought the slow boat to China, which is like, it's gonna take a long time to. Eventually, you'll get there after many lifetimes. So, what Srila Prabhupada gave us, the 16 rounds, is essential. Some people go, I cannot do it, I cannot chant these 16 rounds. You must. No, it's too much. You must. No, I can't do it. You must. Oh, I can't do it. All right, start with 8. Right? Start with 8. I can't do 8. All right, start with 4. All right, and then gradually build it up. But you must come, but don't stay at 4. Don't stay at 8. Don't stay at 12. 16 is the number, no less. Because it is at that number that we can go back to Godhead. And that was Prabhupada's purpose. That was the purpose of Lord Chaitanya. Although the slow boats to China, right, they are welcome. Although in this movement, in Germany there was for a while there were posters at the German Autobahn, the German highway, where there's no speed limits, right? And on the sign they have 3 lanes, always, at least, minimum 3 lanes. And it's like slow lane, middle lane, you do about 150, 160, and then the fast lane, 250, and like this. So they have the slow lane, and they had the sign, and it said, it's right side traffic, so on the right is the slow lane. And it said, turtles to the right. Right? You see a whole row of turtles walking on this poster to the right. So the turtle lane. So in our movement, we also have a turtle lane. We do. Prabhupada also had a turtle lane. Krishna has a turtle lane in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says in chapter 12, he said, if you cannot follow the regulative principles, then you can work for me and a few other concessions like that. You can still be connected and be in the turtle lane. But when Krishna said Sarva Dharma Parityaya, his idea was not the turtle lane. Right? His idea was that we would go at least into the middle lane, at least a madhyamadhikari, at least dedicated to the process and taking it very serious, and at least really try for real. Try for real to be a devotee. Not half-baked, but for real. Today is Ekadasi, it's potato day, and if I get a half-baked potato, I will not be happy. Just for the cooks, right? Krishna is also not happy with half-baked rounds, with half-baked spiritual life. Krishna wants us to come back to Godhead. It is his desire. So the initiation is meant for that. Therefore, at least madhyamadhikari, at least serious, at least dedicated, serious, yes, 16 rounds, somehow or other. I'm going to do it no matter what. And it can be tough in a hospital, especially when you're in a hospital bed. Whew. After this one operation, I thought, this time I'm not going to make it. And then, in the whole day, I struggled. And it was like, it was like 8 o'clock at night, and I had only 7 rounds, and I thought, oh boy, I may not make it, I may not make it. And then suddenly, I got this burst of energy, and I just chanted like, phew, and I made it. Krishna, Krishna is with us. Krishna will help when we make the effort, because Krishna is there all along. And when we take this initiation, Krishna is there, and Krishna wants us. He wants us to go back to Godhead. He cannot wait. When are you coming back? This is Krishna. Therefore, this initiation is a wonderful opportunity, and we should take it very serious and take full advantage of it. Thank you very much for allowing me to make some comments. And, please, Maharaj, is there a microphone today? Right. Yeah. The Supreme Personality of Godhead wants it. I think that's a very good closing. So thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.